In June of 1855, a 19-year-old kid from Baltimore left town with a buddy, fly rod and rifle in tow, heading for East Tennessee. Tying their own flies, making their own bullets, they spent all summer and fall traveling across the Allegheny and Blue Ridge Mountains. They slept in the cabins of mountaineers, basically living off the land, which really meant eating a lot of squirrels and wild turkey, and then maybe a few brook trout. The young man's name was James Alexander Henshall. He graduated from high school in Baltimore when he was 16 years old, but before he decided what he wanted to do for the rest of his life, he spent a while traveling around, basically just exploring the mid-Atlantic. So by now, his parents had moved up to Cincinnati, Ohio. When he figured out what he wanted to do, he decided he wanted to go to medical school. So he gets on a train in Cumberland, Maryland, heading up to Ohio, when he sits next to a couple of gentlemen who are talking about fishing. And the fish they're talking about is the black bass. And Henshall had never even seen one, never even heard of this fish, but the guys were talking about it with such enthusiasm about it being a really great game fish that it certainly piqued his interest. So that next summer, July 4th, 1856, he and a buddy hop on a train heading for the Little Miami River to do some black bass fishing. Now, he and his friend both caught a fish that day, nothing major, maybe the 1 to 1.5 pound range, but what it ended up doing was planting a seed in Henshall that would end up being a lifelong passion of his. So he's still a young man at the time. He finishes medical school in 1859. Abraham Lincoln was elected president, and the country's on the brink of the Civil War. Now, Henshall's sympathies were still with the South, but he really didn't agree with why they were seceding, so he did volunteer his services with the Union Army. And he spends most of the war in Kentucky, but after the war, he moves back up to Cincinnati to reopen his medical practice. Then he moves it out to New York City to help a surgeon friend for a couple of years, but apparently getting tired of the big city life, decides to move on out to Wisconsin. Now, he's still a doctor, but he starts taking more of an interest in the scientific study of fish. He builds a house on the bank of Pewaukee Lake, and he starts writing a book. And the book, which will be published in 1881, almost 15 years after he starts writing it, is called The Book of the Black Bass. Now, he publishes one more book in 1889 and eventually retires from his medical practice and gets a job working for the U.S. Fish Commission. He works with them for 20 years. He's a superintendent of hatcheries in Bozeman, Montana, and down in Tupelo, Mississippi. He retires from the Fish Commission in 1917 when he's 81 years old. Now, he's already made a name for himself as an outdoor writer, and Forest and Stream magazine published his autobiography over 27 months in the early 1920s. But unfortunately, he's in his 80s and he starts going blind. He can't work anymore. He's got no family or children, so he's really got to live out the last of his years on what little he's making from these articles in Forest and Stream magazine. Now, he dies in Cincinnati in 1925 at 89 years old. Now, while his last few years might have been sad, he did lead a pretty exciting life, and he left us with one of these seminal works in fishing literature that certainly put the smallmouth bass on the map as a prominent game fish. And the one quote that many of us have heard when talking about the smallmouth, I consider him, inch for inch, pound for pound, the gamest fish that swims. And this remarkable man that many of us who fish for smallmouth certainly owe a debt of gratitude to, he also left us with a couple of fly patterns. And one in particular, the one that bears his name, the one I want to tie for you today. I hope you like it. So there it is in the vise, a Henshall, very classic, old school type pattern. You see a lot of these in Mary Orvis Marbury's book, certainly in the bass fly section. Now I'm tying this on a size 8. This is a barbless 1X long wet fly hook, and I'm going to use red thread. You could certainly use black, but since we have a red wool head, red thread will just make the head look cleaner. So go ahead and take a base all the way back. And as with a lot of these old school wet flies, you've got a gold tag. So I'm going to catch in Mylar, this is a medium, couple wraps, and I'm actually going to take it back with my thread to where I'm going to start wrapping it. Okay, I think that will be about enough right there. And now where my thread is, right there, that's where I'm going to stop wrapping the tag. But here's a trick. 3 wraps up there just to get it out of your way. Now let's flip this over gold side up and make about three wraps to get your gold tag here. Now with those 3 wraps, I can back them up, and my thread is right here where I want to catch this off. So let's go ahead and catch this with 2 or 3 tight wraps here. Now let's catch in our tail. About 4 strands of peacock sword fibers here. And, you know, not real short, but, you know, not terribly long. I'd say a hook gap is probably a good length right here. So let's take this back and stop those right about the front of that gold tag and either bury or snip these right here. And let's take our thread up to the front where we're going to catch in the peacock herl. So I've got 3 strands right here, and you know, I've left the brittle stuff on right there. I'll break this off in a second, so you can just pull your thread tight, snap that. Now we'll take this down to where we're going to start wrapping the body. And I'm going to leave my thread about halfway, and you can spin these as a rope if you want. In fact, the picture in Forgotten Flies looked like it kind of was, because they were fairly matted down and it was a fairly thin herl body. So either way, just wrap them up to the front, maybe a couple eye lengths back. Now here's the old school trick that I'd never tried before. It's wrapping a collar hackle out of bucktail. So I've got a fairly significant chunk of bucktail in my stacker here. Let's see how well this stacked. Okay, it looks pretty straight. So what we do here, and I suppose this is how they did it way back in the day, you just kind of catch it on, get your length right. Now we're going to put a loose wrap or 2 around it, and then just spin this around. So try to spin this all the way around your fly. So now we've got kind of a collar hackle there, and I guess this is how they did it. I, you know, really can't say for sure, but I mean, that looks a little bit like a, you know, a feathered collar hackle, but it's not, it's bucktail. So just take your time and snip the front off. Okay, I think that's fine. I might have nicked my thread there. I got a little stray piece, but I think we're going to be fine. Now, I really can't for the life of me figure out why you would do this. If you had access to white hackle, I think it would just have been a lot easier. But either way, that's how Henshall tied it, so that's how I'm trying. Now the next thing, it's our wing. And just slips, whole slips of a feather tips. And the recipe, the original said a bird-like pigeon. Now, I don't have pigeon, and what's the next closest thing? I would say maybe quail. But my goal here is to just get these, you know, kind of perpendicular and keeping them in the plane of the hook right here. So what I'll do is 2 loose wraps and then just kind of check my position. See, those are twisted a little bit. That's what I'm trying to avoid. So just keep at it till you get it right. Okay, I think that is in the plane of the hook right there, but I'm going to put a few more tight wraps going forward because I really don't want these guys to spin around on me. Okay, and for the most part they're still sticking upright, so let's go ahead and snip this off. Now let's put some wax on our thread and then dub the head. And this is another thing you don't see in a lot of today's flies. I just took some wool yarn, literally about a 6-inch string, piece of it, cut it into little 1/2-inch pieces, and put it in my coffee grinder. And that's what I'm going to dub on right here for the head. And it's not much. It's literally maybe 1 inch or 1.5 inches of a noodle here. And there we go. Got a little bit of room right here for a head, just right behind the eye, a few turns so we got room for a whip finish. So there we go, a Henshall. Pretty nifty little old school pattern. Not too difficult to tie, but you know, certainly unique and not something you see a whole lot of today. So that's it, everybody. I appreciate y'all watching. Take care, and we'll see you next time.